My name's Jim Webb. I'm with MillerCoors. I'm going to get this out of the way earlier. I didn't bring samples, so if that's why you're here, you can go ahead and walk out. I won't be offended. So I'm the Director of Customer Solutions Operations for MillerCoors. And what that means is I work with all of our selling teams to make sure they have the tools they need and the training they need to go out and work effectively with our retailers to help them understand the forces that are driving the beer category and how they can go out and impact today's beer consumers. And so with that, I was brought into the Tableau community to help bring Tableau to our entry-level sales reps. So what I'm going to do today is share with you a little bit about our journey and how we enabled our sales force with Tableau, and tell you a little bit about what I think we did well along the way, and where if we had an opportunity to do it all over again, some of the things that we would do differently. So really, I just want to talk to you today about some of the things that we thought about as we built mobile dashboards for our sales team. So first, I'll give you a brief overview of the company for those who don't know. Miller and Coors came together in a joint venture in 2008, bringing together all of these wonderful brands that you see up here on the screen. I know what's particularly important to this group, so let's go ahead and get to the data. So we are, in fact, the #2 brewer in the United States. We have 12 brands with over $100 million in sales. Our two largest brands, Miller Lite and Coors Light, both eclipsed $2 billion in sales last year. 23 of the top 100 fastest-selling beer items in the category are from the MillerCoors portfolio, and 41% of all beer-buying households purchase a MillerCoors item. And as a matter of fact, 29% of all beer baskets include an item from MillerCoors. So that is to say, I hope some of these wonderful brands are waiting for you back home in your fridge when you get back home this week. So how did we bring Tableau to our sales reps? Well, that's interesting. Pay attention to the right side, not the left side. That's better. So when we started our Tableau journey, we were walking down a path that I'm sure many of you are on. We were really looking to have a better conversation with our data-rich customers. How do we better engage with our large chain customers, the Walmarts, the Kroger, the 7-Eleven of the world? But we started examining the way that we sell, and we determined we had a really clear opportunity that was right in front of our face that we had ignored with Tableau in the past. We have an entry-level sales force that calls on our on-premise business, bars and restaurants. And the thing that's really important about this bar and restaurant business is it's where people discover and fall in love with new beer brands. So if we're going to continue to win with consumers, it's vital that we win with bars and restaurants and that we get our brands in front of the right influential, the hip, the cool, the trendy bars and restaurants. And I'm sure many of you have a bar that you love going to that looks a lot like this bar. 25 tap handles, 50 tap handles, 100 tap handles. This is becoming the norm in the beer industry. And the on-premise business is historically, bars and restaurant business has historically been one that's been ruled by gut feel or relationships. It's been that business where a bar manager says, yeah, I know what my regular customers drink. They're not going to like that brand. Or, yeah, I think my regular guys are really going to like that. But in a world where you're now trying to manage a portfolio of 100 beers rather than managing a portfolio of 6 or 8 or 10 beers, we really need data to help make sense of what is going on in this marketplace. So let's talk a little bit about the person who actually goes in and makes this sales call. Well, most of our sales reps are brand new salespeople. Many of them are right out of college. This is the first job that they've had. And they've never analyzed someone's business. They've never had to mine through a sales report. And they're going to be starting with us with an account base of about 60 different bars and restaurants. And we need them to get up to speed quickly on what's driving success or failure in each of these. And an interesting component about this program is for all 250 of our sales reps, we require that they be 100% mobile. We're going to put them in a new city. They're going to learn a new market. So in addition to learning our brands, to learning their new customer base, to learning how to analyze sales data. They spend most of the day trying to figure out where they're going to go grocery shopping and where the dry cleaner is and trying to find an apartment. So having share of mind as we onboard people is difficult, and we needed a way that we could get them up to speed quickly with digesting and understanding the business. And when they're selling, they're in there. I don't know how many of you have waited tables or been a bartender before, but our folks are in there right before a bar or restaurant opens, just as they're setting up and getting ready for guests to come in, usually right before that lunch rush. And for a bar manager, that time is really about making sure that the cash register is set up the way it needs to be set up. It's worrying whether Jim is going to call in sick and not show up to 10 bar again today. It's really consumed with making sure that that day's activities are ready to go when guests arrive. So when our sales team hits that door, we have about a 5-minute window of opportunity where we're going to put some sales material in front of them. And that's where we saw a great opportunity with Tableau. We armed our sales reps with iPads, and that's where all of their sales information lived. So with Tableau Mobile and delivered through Tableau Online, we were able to put all of the sales data that they need in the same spot where they have all of their sales information. And we could have that quick 5-minute conversation right over a bar. So let's talk a little bit about how we were previously delivering information to our sales team. So this is I see you all with the iPhones. I'm going to get in trouble when I get home. So this is a shot of our intranet. I'm sure you guys have something similar. So what we used to ask our sales reps to do was go in here, pull down 6 to 9 different reports to understand the KPIs that are driving their business, to understand what performance looked like over the past week. And this was all life behind the firewall. So we really didn't have a lot of consistency in how we were reporting our business and what our sales reps were engaging in. They would generally pick the report that made them look the best or that told the best story about how their performance was going. So we really had a great need to drive a one source of the truth, to drive some clarity on what's important for their business. And even when you got into one of these reports, I know that you guys have reports that look exactly like this. I see a lot of head nods. So this was the report that we put in front of you. So there's 6 to 9 different reports that look like this. And to really tell a consistent story about what's going on with your business, to have a clear picture of what's driving your business, you're going to need to download 6 to 9 different reports like this and start correlating across all those different pieces of information to pull together a story. So I think you can imagine that when we take someone who's right out of school, brand new to selling anything, and ask them to pull together a report that looks like this 6 different times for all of their customers, we were getting really good data-driven selling stories, probably for their top 1 or 2 accounts. And everyone else would receive kind of a canned, familiar message that they would repeat over and over again. So how could we get better about telling a story that was personalized and unique to each and every one of our customers that we called on? We picked a couple of things that we really wanted to emphasize with Tableau. These were going to be the measures that we were going to focus on with our sales team. And first for us, that starts with volume. So volume for us is what keeps the lights on. It's what continues to drive our business, is making sure that we're selling brands that have a high rate of repeat. It's also important for our retailers that we're selling brands that consumers will stay in the bar and order a second beer and not just be a one and done. So how do we make sure we're driving the right kind of brands that drive volume for our customers? We wanted them to understand what items were at risk. So we wanted them to know in advance when they went in for a sales call if there had been a lapse in a buying cycle. We wanted to be able to identify if there was a product where we hadn't ordered it in a certain number of weeks, so that we could start that conversation to say, have you not reordered this because it's just slowed down movement? Did you just forget to reorder it the last time your distributor representative was in here and you didn't ask for an additional order? Or is there something we need to do to help improve consumer engagement for this product? Because if we lose an item, the most difficult thing that we do is selling distribution. So in that competitive landscape of 100 tap handles, there is a dogfight every time one of those handles opens up. And if we lose one, we're going to be one of many brands in line to try to be the next on draft within that location. So we want to identify those distribution opportunities where it makes sense for the customer and we can sell in a new brand for distribution. So let's talk a little bit about where we are now. Now that we've put Tableau out in the hands on a mobile device for our entire sales team. So first, what this allowed us to do is fill a data gap with an independent customer. So if you're Walmart or Kroger, Walgreens, 7-Eleven, any of these large customers, you're used to living in a data-rich environment. So bringing new data to these customers, it's hard to make an impression. But when we went to our independent bars and restaurants, and we were able to show them what was performing well in the market, how trends were changing, what was going on with consumer dynamics, all of a sudden we were an invaluable part of their business planning. We were seen as an asset to them because we were able to deliver information that they aren't getting from any other source. We were able to restore a work-life balance. So I showed you all of those reports that we used to use. Those were available exclusively behind a firewall, and I have a team that goes out and sells with an iPad. So the only time they could really go in, pull together their reports was generally on a Sunday night. And we heard from reps that they were spending upwards of 4, 5, 6 hours every week just doing the basic maintenance and information gathering that they needed to do to be knowledgeable with their customer base they were going to call in the next week. So now with Tableau online on an iPad, they can pull up a full sales report, they can pull up all the key metrics that are driving customer business while they're sitting in the parking lot preparing for the sale. So in a short 5 or 10 minute period, they can go in and tell a relevant story to that retailer that's customized based on the trends within their business and their geographic area. And we've been able to scale extremely quickly with Tableau Online. So our deployment started with Tableau Online as a small pilot community. We had probably about 20 users. And we immediately saw the value of what we could achieve by putting this in the hands of our entire sales team. So we were able to quickly expand our distribution without having to wait for a big server ramp up, without having to get a large expenditure approved by our IT teams. We were able to ramp to our full 250-person sales team in under 90 days. And just as a plug for Tableau Online, I'll dispel a rumor that I hear often. People say, oh, Tableau Online is great, but my data is private. I can't have it out there for the whole world to see. Tableau Online and Tableau Public are two totally different products. So Tableau Online, you can think of it as a hosted version of Server. And that's what we use to scale our business very quickly. And most importantly, we're exploring our data, and we're having fun with our data. We get calls from our sales reps all the time that say, here's what I was able to sell in, or here's what I was able to achieve, here's the promotion that I put in place because I understood what was going on with the data and what was going on in the market. But more importantly, they're calling in and engaging with us on how they would like to see the next version. So they're calling in and saying, you know, if we had this dimension, or if I could change the viz to look this way, I could tell this story. And that's something that an engagement you don't get with Excel. No one's calling you about the Excel report and saying, boy, if you added this dimension to the pivot table, I would be much more effective. So Tableau's fun, and it's gotten our young sales team engaged and involved with data, and we have them telling a data-driven story and breaking that mold of the relationship-based sell and the gut feel-based sell. So I'll talk a little bit about what we did well. So I can't emphasize this enough, the concept of starting with the end in mind. You really have to have a vision, and particularly when you do mobile, because you're dealing with such limited screen space and you're dealing with such limited attention time, that you really have to have a strong idea of what you want to accomplish. So some of the key factors that we think we did well for our rollout is, number one, if you could do only one thing with your mobile dashboard, what would it be? So really think hard. I mean, I showed you our 6 to 9 different KPI reports. We could have put any number of things on our mobile dashboards, but we worked really hard to say, what is the one thing that we would want someone to take away from a dashboard? And we made that front and center for them. It's really easy when we're so used to designing for desktop to say, well, I need to put all of these metrics that are important, or I'm going to allow my user to drill through and find the next thing. Think about how you guys use your phone for all of the other purposes that you pull your phone out of your pocket. It's just to check the sports score. It's to check what the temperature is going to be tomorrow morning. You're looking at it for that one little piece of information. So when you design for mobile in Tableau, you should think the same way of how do I deliver that one key piece of information I want someone to know at that point of impact. We tried to utilize best practices that were not just about function, but also about form. I put up here, for those of you who haven't seen this, Menard's depiction of Napoleon's march to Moscow. If you haven't attended the session I attended every year on the beautiful art of data visualization, there's not a session I can recommend enough if you're really thinking about mobile. It really gives you great ideas on how to make things stand out. Because an important part of the mobile experience for our users is they're not going to have time to dig through information. The visualization itself needs to tell the story. They're not going to have time to dig through or not have the attention span to dig through lots of different filters or lots of different views. So concentrating on the form of your design as much as you concentrate on the functionality or the data. And lastly, have a plan in place for your pilot group, the way you're going to gather feedback, and how you're going to revise the dashboard on an ongoing basis. When we started building, one of the things that we started out with, we were going to bring in an outside consulting firm to build our dashboard for us, just as a speed to market initiative. Let's bring in someone who's a professional, have them build this out, we can get it out the door quicker. And what we realized even very, very early on with our conversations with users is this was going to be a living, breathing thing. There was always going to be a change. There was always going to be something else that we wanted to highlight. So we slowed down a little bit and brought it in-house and made sure that our own internal analyst team was ready to build this, so that on an ongoing basis, we can continue to have a conversation with our users and add new functionality and improvements as they point out ways that they could be more effective out there selling in the market. So the next part is about challenging assumptions. And this is the map of the known universe as it sat for thousands of years. And it was a very difficult thing to get this to change. I'm sure that you guys have the same challenges in your business. And Adam spoke this morning from the keynote about some of the myths that are long-held beliefs that we all just believe to be true. So I would challenge you to ask yourself what's truly necessary. And a big part of that is understanding the difference between what is an everyday metric and what is a sometimes metric. What are those metrics that someone needs with them in their pocket all the time or on that iPad in their hand all the time? What can you truly not live without knowing? And what are the other things that are nice to know or that are important for a monthly one-on-one or a quarterly business review? And really stop and think about all the ways that you measure your business, all the ways that you're delivering dashboards today, and start crossing off those things that you don't need on an everyday, ongoing basis when you're dealing with a mobile dashboard. And then think about what are the things that truly spark action with your sales team or with your customer. One of the most important things we learned, and it actually caused us to redesign everything that we did. When we started building our dashboard, we built it the way that we thought about the business. You know, we're a Fortune 500 company who reports out to Wall Street, and the thing that's important to us is annual year-over-year growth. That's the way we look at our business internally. That's the way we all talk about sales numbers. So when we started building mobile dashboards, we started building them with annual year-over-year growth as a key metric. And we had one of our sales reps call in and say, yeah, you know, it's great. My bar manager finds that interesting, but you know, he really just wants to see what he's doing versus the guy down the street. And that stopped us in our tracks. That flipped a switch for us. And we realized this sales rep isn't using it for reporting. They're using it for a selling tool. So we completely changed the way that we thought about what we were building and essentially turned the screen around. We said, how do we change it from something that our sales reps are looking at, having a conversation, to a conversation saying, hey, Mrs. Bar Manager, here's what's going on with your competition down the street. Here's something you should really think about to take advantage of this opportunity. So that completely changed the way that we looked at metrics because that's what we found sparked action with our customers. And lastly, I'd ask you to challenge which of the metrics that you use are real drivers of success. Particularly for sales teams, we all use metrics like call frequency and engagement time and things like that, number of engagements we've run, number of times we've visited an account during the week. And these are really important. I don't want to minimize that in any way. We all know it's important to try to maintain our customer relationships. But are they really the things that are driving the results that you want? Are they driving that one metric that you decided was going to be the most important thing? And if they aren't, is it something that we need to report to our sales team on an ongoing basis? Do we need them to be constantly monitoring that piece of performance? So there's a nice quote that I like here from the Dalai Lama. When you talk, you're only repeating what you already know. But if you listen, you may learn something new. And we tried to take this concept to heart. So we really tried to understand how our sales team sold. This is something, especially if you're in more of an analytical role, a headquarter-based role, you're used to reporting out sales facts and figures, I really encourage you to follow some of these steps. So first, conduct some interviews with your users on what works and what doesn't. What are the things that they're using today? What are they using today to make decisions? And what are the things that you want them to be using where they're not engaged? And try to find the differences between those two things. We found lots of metrics that we knew to be important drivers of business success that were just unclear. It was just something that wasn't well explained, and we could better demonstrate through a visualization. Get out and spend a day in the life with your intended audience. So Courtney Oliver out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin was kind enough to drive me around in her car for one cold, snowy January day. She even let me attempt to sell in a couple of handles of Miller Lite. I failed. She laughed at me. She was right to laugh at me. But get out there and sell with them. Watch how they sell. Listen to the questions that their customers ask. Listen to the things that they are faced with. Those are some of the things that we learned. When we heard the questions that their customers were asking, we could better plan for the information they needed to have at their fingertips. It wasn't always the same thing that we thought they needed to have at their fingertips. So the more you can get out there and really understand what it's like to walk in their shoes, the more successful you're going to be in designing for them. And this one I think is really important when you talk about mobile. Provide them your dashboard and give them no instructions. If most of you are from big companies like mine, I made this recommendation as this is actually when we started to pilot a version 2. And I said, overnight, let's just change it. Let's take version 1 down, let's put version 2 up and just see what happens. And everyone said, no, Jim, you can't do it. Julie's actually making a face at me right now saying, like, that's not a good idea, Jim, you shouldn't have done that. But they said, no, we need to have a WebEx, we're gonna need to have a day-long seminar, we're gonna need to provide a tips and tricks orientation document. And one of our analysts said to me, Jim, is there any actual proven success behind piloting it this way? And I'd tell you that for the average person has about 120 different apps on their phone. And I would challenge that when you downloaded those apps, you probably didn't go to the website and read the instruction manual or read the product release notes. You just downloaded Uber, you filled out an account form, 7 minutes later you were in the backseat of a stranger's Honda Civic going to dinner, and you were already bored by that concept. You were back on Facebook while you were in the back of the car because it's so natural for us now to just download something, play with it, and have it work. So put your dashboard out there in their hands and just watch what they do with it. So it's one of those things, you'll put it out there and the first thing they'll click, you'll say like, well, they clicked the thing they weren't supposed to click. We got to go redesign it. But it's a great way to learn. This is how we launched our dashboards. We just put it in everyone's hands and we started watching how they filtered. We started watching how they compared data to each other. And it told us a lot about how they think about the business problem and how we can better deliver a solution to that. So I'll tell you a little bit about where I think we could make improvements if we had a chance to do everything a second time. So first, it doesn't have to do everything right now. What we tried to do is we tried to completely replace that entire reporting catalog overnight. And we probably bit off more than we could chew. What we found is that if we meter out one piece at a time and let people be successful and let them understand that one piece, it's easier to bring them another piece of the puzzle a little bit later on. If we tried to do a massive change to how they did planning and how they did sales and how they looked at brands and territories, it was just too much for them to digest. So what we ended up focusing on was three easy things. And our dashboards all started to look a lot like this. So, we wanted them to understand what the big brands were that drove business. We wanted to provide that selling story so they could say, here's what works for me and here's what works for my competition if I'm a bar owner. And then we still provide that year-over-year view. We want them to understand if you're selling beer in Wrigleyville in the month of October, you've got a really big volume hurdle coming up that I don't know that the Cubs are going to help me with. So we cut it down to just three easy things. And when we were successful and when this was seeded, then we started talking about how we move on to the next piece of reporting. Then we started talking about how we add an additional piece onto that puzzle. So there's a parable about blind men and an elephant. So there's a group of blind men who have all been tasked with explaining what an elephant is. And one blind man walks up and he grabs the elephant's ear and he says, oh, the elephant is like a fan. And another man walks up and he grabs the elephant's tusk and he says, no, 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 the elephant is like a spear. And another man walks up and he puts his hands on the elephant's rib cage. He says, no, 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 the elephant is a broad wall. And depending on where you hear this parable, this either ends with all the blind men coming together and learning how to work together and collaborate, or it ends in them fighting to the death. And if your organization is like mine, the parable ends with us fighting to the death. So my point in this is when you're trying to make a change like this for your sales leadership team and your internal teams, you need to provide a vision of what is possible. So when you're used to selling off of a spreadsheet, when you're used to having a conversation that looks and sounds like Excel, it's very difficult to explain, no, we're just going to give them two metrics. We're going to set them loose in the field and just give them 2 or 3 things that they're going to need to be successful, and that's enough. You'll be told you're crazy. You'll be told that that's not possible. You'll be told all these other things are really more important. So what we did internally is we just bootstrapped our own solution. We built it. We just said, you know what, we're going to build it. We're going to go out there and we're going to run with it. We're going to show you what can happen. So I would encourage all of you, if you're thinking about making this change, just build your vision. Build what you think is going to make people successful and put it in the hands of your users and see how they react. We were able to move from a spreadsheet to this conversation in 90 days because we showed people that this was an easier way for our users to understand what was going on in their market. And once they understood it, we couldn't stop them from asking to have access for their entire sales team. And lastly here on things that we could have done better, one of my favorite quotes, I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. So we are all constantly trying to push our work out the door and get on to the next thing on our to-do list. But with a project like this, and when you're working with mobile, you really need to try to seek simplicity. So what I'm showing you is the actual first draft of what was proposed on how we would measure which of our accounts were succeeding and which ones were failing. My neighborhood bar is a bar called Four Farthings. Anyone want to tell me how Four Farthings is doing from this graph? So we sat down and we said, here are the things that are important to our business. Here's the outcome we want to measure. Here are the different pieces of dimensionality that are important. And the first draft was, yeah, great, we can cram all of that stuff into the same viz and we're done, let's go home. Actually, there were a great number of people who said, yeah, this is perfect. Yeah, you got all the measures in there. That's exactly what we asked for. Great job. But what you really need to do is continue to have that conversation, continue to refine. There's a great Abraham Lincoln quote that if you gave me 8 hours to cut down a tree, I would spend the first 7 hours sharpening the axe. And that's what you need to do here. So we went from the viz that you see on the left to the viz that you see on the right. And that was a really painful process internally because we still wanted all of our sales reps to understand these different components that were drivers of the business. But at the end of the day, what we knew was important was just conveying where they were performing and then let them dig into more information. So we ended up with a really simple bar chart that showed here's where you are and here's what your goal is. And from there, we get them to start asking questions rather than trying to deliver all of the information all at the same time with one viz on a mobile dashboard. So in closing, and I'll leave some time for questions here, obviously. I'll just provide you my 2 cents. So first is spend 2 hours of design for every 1 hour that you spend building. When we started our project, we sat in a conference room for 2 straight days for 8 hours with no computers, just a whiteboard and some markers. And we just talked about what we wanted it to be and what was important. And we just drew pictures of what we thought it could look like. And we stopped ourselves from having the conversation of, well, how are we going to do that? Is that going to be a level of detail expression? Is that a split axis? Is it going to be is that going to be 1 chart or 2 charts? Just sit down and think about what you want it to look like. And spend the time on design so that when you get into the functional part and the build, you're really clear on what you want to deliver to your users. Ask your team what they need, but more importantly, ask them why they need it. So we had lots of questions about, I would need to know this piece of information and that piece of information, and that's how you end up with that green and red color blindness chart. When you try to incorporate all the different pieces. Really get to the core of what you're trying to answer. And usually it's a lot simpler than we make it sound. And one tip that I will point out here from our experience, this is what I refer to as the filter trap. Lots of times you'll hear someone say, oh, we need to filter on geography, and then we need to have a filter for time frame. That's someone telling you that they need more dimensionality with your viz, but you need to stop and think if filter is the best way to do it. Especially when you're on mobile, it's very hard to filter. It's going to eat up a lot of real estate, especially if you have a lot of dimensionality and you're scrolling through that big, long pick list of functions. So stop and think about why people need it, and stop and think about how you can deliver that information in the most seamless way possible. And lastly, build your vision and encourage some creativity. I shared with you that most of what we learned from our users coming to us and saying, this is what I need from the data. This is what my customer is asking for. So I really encourage you to let them be creative and listen to what their needs are. That's how we have truly achieved almost everything that we've built. Is not stuff that we dreamed up. It's stuff that we were told this would be really effective to use with my customer. So with that, I will remind you there's a survey. I'll ask you to log onto your app and take the survey. If you found this to be helpful, please fill the survey out. If you didn't, you can keep your opinion to yourself. But I will take any questions that you guys have. So the question was number of sales folks. So with this group that I'm talking about here today with our independent bars and restaurants, we have about 250 sales representatives all over the country, mainly in major metropolitan geographies.
Are you doing this outside of North America?
We have, outside of North America, we have some implementation of Tableau. It doesn't look the same because the business is very different outside of North America. Just the way that they sell in Canada and the UK it's a very different sales model, so it doesn't look the same, but they are heavy Tableau users.
Do they have access to all of the data, or do you have it just to their region or area, or how do you?
So the question was around how much data they have access to. And we have it structured a couple of different ways. At this point, what we started with is we gave them access to their market and their peers. So a couple of things we found. We obviously want them to know what they're doing, but we wanted to encourage some friendly competition. So they could see what the person down the street was doing and how they racked and stacked compared to their teammates, things of that nature. And then we do have some kind of different levels of visualization that are broader level planning that do show a broader picture of the market.
Do you do, like, is it a behind the scenes hierarchy, or is it like a filter, or like how do you do that?
Yeah, so the mechanics of it, we have, within our data set, we have it defined what market they work on and what team they work on. So it filters to that user's team.
Do you have any issues with some of your more veteran sales agents, kind of getting them to buy in, even though they understood the potential, but
No, everyone bought in day one. It was easy. I don't know what you're doing wrong. Yeah, of course. I mean, frankly, really one of the bigger challenges was not so much that our sales reps evolved pretty quickly, because they're 18 to 24 months in that position, we promote them out. So the veterans were frankly gone in about 6 months. But the challenge was a lot with the sales leadership. So it's how we get their management to say, yeah, I'm comfortable with them being in the market with just these 2 or 3 things, and getting rid of the, back in my day mentality. So that was just a lot of, sharing best practices and results, and working with them on why this was the right thing to do. And once they see their team using it and engaged with it, it's kind of hard to argue with results, because we know they weren't engaged previously. In the back. Yeah, so the question was around a better hygiene with information coming back into a Salesforce. Our issue wasn't so much there, but our issue was more with understanding the meaning of some of these key metrics. So our data hygiene wasn't so much of an issue with what they were inputting. What they give us back is pretty limited, so we didn't have big concerns there. But what we did find is they were able to more intelligently have a conversation about a broader range of metrics beyond just, you bought 200 cases last week. So they could really get into understanding brand velocity and competitive market areas and things like that we wanted them to understand that were hard to digest in Excel.
Yes, you talked a lot about how competition was a big part of the sales job, how they would go there and talk about that. How did you incorporate that in your design when you're talking about all these different industries? I'm sure there's like little bar and then there's giant bar. And how do they learn, I guess, the customer?
So first of all, everything that we deliver to a customer in terms of competition is, it's all blinded. We don't give them specifics and say, this is Joe's bar and this is Bob's bar. We just kind of say, these are bars within your comp market. But we have, frankly, the way our call coverage is set up is these groups are calling on very similar outlets. They just kind of tend to be the same. So you're not comparing a sports bar on the corner to Soldier Field. They're all kind of the same type of bar.
So it's a generic kind of like, this bar is on average doing this much Coors sales volume, and how is this, everyone else is 12% higher compared to you?
Yeah, so without getting too specific on exactly how we measure it, yes, we kind of line them up and say, this is what the market looks like in terms of what you sell.
Where and how did you draw the line between reporting that comes natively out of a CRM solution like Salesforce.com and the reports being delivered to?
So actually, we started implementing this solution before we had stood up Salesforce. So we're a little bit chicken before the egg, or whatever it would be. We're a little unique in that we went with this before we had ever put Salesforce in their hands. And what kind of the model that we're actually migrating a lot of it into Salesforce now, so it all nests in there in the same spot. But what we really tried to do is we tried to make Tableau mobile, their mobile app, the retailer-facing view, and everything in Salesforce is for the sales rep to analyze their own performance.
Were you able to layer in IRI or Nielsen data, or was it strictly depletion?
I'm not going to talk about what data sources we use.
Did you standardize the size of the iPad that you designed for, or did you allow them to scale up or down?
Yeah, so the question was whether we scaled it up or down. So we're fortunate in that our sales force is all on iPads. So we knew what we were designing for. We could build it for one. No, it's all the same model. Yeah, so we knew exactly the screen size we were designing for, so we had a shortcut there. We do have the vision, though, of converting it to iPhone. We just haven't gotten around to it. Yes?
What's the size of your development team on the Tableau side, and what was their experience with Tableau?
So when the question was around size of the development team and experience. So when we started, the first version, the development team was one. But when kind of our ongoing state and where we're at now, we have 4 analysts with Tableau, but when they came in, they were all green. Their first question was, what's Tableau? So, the way we onboarded them, we got them really heavily involved with local user groups. They were all out here at conference last year doing lots of hands-on training sessions, but they started out with 0 experience. Do I work out of Golden, Colorado? No, I'm out of our headquarters in Chicago. But I do get out to Golden quite frequently.
I actually have two questions, so my first, both of these questions apply to my own company, like the company I work for. So the first question is, do any of the departments in your company, other than your sales rep, use Tableau? Because in a company that I work for, depending on the departments, it can system-wise and visualization-wise. Like software, we can be in a silo and
Yeah.
information just doesn't cross.
Yeah, so the question was, do we use it across different departments? The answer is yes. We have kind of different deployments all over the place with our strategy team, with our supply chain team, with our operations team. So there are several different uses and deployments of Tableau within the company.
And then my second question is, when there's a new version of Tableau, how do you roll it out? Because that's something
Yeah.
this question on, because it comes out so often, and now everyone is stuck at, my company is stuck at 10.1, and we're like, okay, in dilemma of like, how often should we upgrade it?
Yeah, so the question was around upgrade. So for us, we're fortunate as our deployment is Tableau Online. The day that it comes out, essentially our server is upgraded automatically for us. So for us, it's a pretty simple process of just having our desktop users refresh to the latest version. So, I mean, for us, it's not as big of a challenge as if you had a server deployment and you needed to upgrade everything at the same time. It just kind of happens for us.
Can you share an idea of how much you improve the effectiveness of sales?
So I won't share specifics on sales specifics of what we've improved. But we have seen an immediate improvement in performance against some of our key initiatives. So we have some key metrics that we measure on how the sales rep is performing, key things that they're selling in, and we very quickly saw them start closing gaps at a rate that they were previously not closing gaps. Yes?
You had mentioned a couple times prior to this, they were living behind the firewall. Are you using the Tableau app right on the iPad, or are you still putting it behind some sort of internal security?
No, so the question was around firewall and security. So yes, yeah, what we've used is the Tableau app, which is real easy, username and password, and they're in there. So it's been a big change for them. That one of the biggest things is just for these guys, they're out there in the market, guys and girls, they're out there in the market every day, and it's trying to open up the laptop and get your hotspot going and doing all of that is just a hassle. So just being able to flip it open and say, okay, great, I know 2 things that I need to go talk about this time. In the back.
You showed the red and green dot plot.
Yeah.
The bar graph. You talked about goal setting. That's what the bars there. How did this, as designed for the street-level sales rep, change the goal setting aspect from their leadership?
So the question was around goal setting and how some of the views that we use today have changed it. So we haven't changed our goals or our strategy. We're still striving to deliver the same stuff. We still have the same things that we feel are making us successful. But what we have is a better set of clarity around progress to each of those metrics. I mean, like everyone, there's not just one thing that you're trying to do. You know, there's 2 or 3 things you're trying to keep in balance. And what we found before is people would key into one item, and usually the thing that they were doing best at. So this is a way that because we have really clear views of your performance against those key metrics, we have a better share of mind on where they're at versus each of those things, rather than having that dog's breakfast plot where it's like, okay, all the metrics are in here, but I'm not sure if I'm good or bad on any given one of them. Yes?
So with visualization comes transparency. So a lot of times we had any issues with questioning data or data quality or where the data came from.
No, that just happened naturally again, right? Yeah, of course. I mean, all the time we get calls on your data's wrong. You know, I don't think there's a cure-all for that. Especially early on when people started looking at new pieces of data that they hadn't seen, where they had focused on one side of the business, and then all of a sudden they start looking at another report and their business doesn't look so rosy anymore. You get a lot of questions around, oh, well, your data must be wrong. Exactly, yeah, right. And I don't know that there's a great way to cure that. If anyone's got a solution, I am all ears, but after a certain amount of time, people just kind of get comfortable with it. Yes? Yeah, so obviously, you know, I'm spending today talking about how we did mobile because it's a little bit different, but we have a more traditional engagement with larger chain retailers where we're using, you know, certainly using syndicated data and some of the things that are common within the industry to have a conversation with them. But just by the nature of some of those, you know, it's usually a smaller team. It's not as decentralized. You know, we have a much more traditional Tableau deployment with them, just based on the fact that they're fewer in number and closer in proximity. So, you know, it looks more like desktop and a limited deployment of reporting. Any other questions? All right, well, I thank you all for your time. I appreciate you coming. I look forward to seeing you all later tonight, and we can grab a Coors Light together. Thanks so much.